So in higher consciousness, we have absolute clarity. We're not fogged out by any form of dense energy. We see things clearly for what they are. Usually we don't miss things because we have higher consciousness. And it's all around energy. And this is a very misunderstood aspect of higher consciousness because a lot of people don't understand energy. But they understand being clouded, they understand not having clarity, they understand missing things. As your consciousness levels rise, you don't miss things. You see things for as they are. And a lot of the work that needs to be done is to actually raise your energy field to a higher frequency. If we look at lower frequency energy fields, it keeps us quite unconscious, quite in dreamland in a lot of ways. At the higher levels of consciousness, there is no dream. You're just present to reality. Whatever reality is, whatever's happening in the moment. If your levels are high enough, you're aware of beingness, pure beingness. And whatever we have our awareness on, we live as. So if your awareness is on pure beingness, you live as beingness, which is to live enlightened. If your awareness is on your mind, you live on whatever aspect that may be. So if you're in analysing, you live in analysing. That's, if you're in anger, you live as anger, because that's where your awareness is at. If you've got sadness happening, you live as sadness. If you're into hope and you're dreaming about the future, that's where you live. Because we live basically where our awareness is at. So as your consciousness levels rise, the interest in living in dream drops away because it keeps us at a lower level of consciousness where we don't see what's happening around us very clearly. In other words, we're not very switched on. Switched on is to be present to what's happening around you all the time. Not just what you're doing in front of you, but around you. And if you're dreaming, if you're thinking, which is dreaming, that's not going to be possible, not really. And so if you go into any ashram or any monastery, the first thing they want to teach you is meditation and mindfulness training, so they can get you to be present to what is real rather than present to what is not real, which is what you think. We all lived in reality to a large degree when we were little kids, from about 0 to about 5 or 6, because we hadn't learned at that stage to live in our heads. We were present to what was real rather than present to what we're constantly thinking, which is not real. When we're present to what's real, our energy is pretty pristine. When we're present to what we're thinking, depending on what we're thinking, our energy can get quite murky. So if we're angsting, if we're worrying, our energy field can get quite murky, because we're putting our awareness on angst and we're producing a certain energy field by that angst, which then lives around us, clouding us, stopping us from seeing clearly what's happening. In meditation, the watching of what is real, whatever that may be, usually in Buddhism it's the breath. If we're doing formal meditation, we're practicing coming back to reality and abandoning whatever dream may be happening, whatever thoughts may be happening. I started meditating when I was 28 years old. I hadn't really understood what meditation was before that, because I was a Roman Catholic and we didn't meditate, we prayed, which is another form of dreaming and another way to stay relatively unconscious. In meditation, we're abandoning dream for what is real, whatever that may be. Could be the breath, could be the movement of my hands, it could be the sound of that cooler up there. But awareness needs to be on what is real. And so we went to school, we learned how to live in our heads so we could pass exams, analyse so we could pass exams, so we could get a bit of paper to go to work. Unfortunately, most adults don't ever leave that space. They remain in their heads until they die, analysing, working out problems, worrying, all sorts of different things, dreaming basically. And so they're lost in this matrix of their own mind, quite often believing that matrix to be real. There is nothing real about what you think. Nothing. It is all made up. It's all imagined. And so I like to try to talk people into becoming meditators, which is a bit difficult because meditation to the mind is boring. And in today's modern climate, we've been accustomed to being entertained, really entertained, with television, computers, video games. We are entertainment junkies. And to actually become a meditator, you're abandoning that and you're going back to a place that is way more simple, not so entertaining. And so it's not that appetizing. So people get this idea that they don't really want to meditate, they'd rather keep entertaining themselves. Unfortunately, you stay and dream if you do that. And there's no choice in that. If you don't get out of that, you stay and dream. And your consciousness levels stay at a certain height, which isn't that high. But that's up to you. No one can make you meditate. No one can make you reclaim reality from whatever dream you're in. That's up to you. That's your business, no one else's business. I started meditating when I was 28. I loved it. I loved being present. I loved it. But I also discovered that I'd loved being present before that. I just had different ways of getting there. And most of those ways were dangerous. Racing motorbikes, racing cars, playing rugby, full contact martial arts, hunting sharks underwater, racing speedboats, skiing, anything that actually brought me firmly to the moment was fascinating to me. And I didn't realise at the time that what I was in love with was the moment. It wasn't necessarily the adventures I was having. It wasn't necessarily the racing and the motorbike. I was in love with the moment. I loved being that fresh, that alive, that vital, that real. So when I became a meditator, I discovered a way of being in that space without risking my life, which was really sweet. In that space, where you actually have awareness on reality rather than awareness on dream, you have clarity. You're switched on. You see what's happening around yourself. You don't miss things. So in the business world, because when I was 28, I was a businessman, it was a huge advantage to be a meditator. It was a huge advantage to be aware of what was real as opposed to what was not real. I was running a publishing company at the time and I had 35 staff members, and they were all relatively difficult to get along with because most of them were professional salesmen. So I had to be pretty switched on just to deal with them. If I'd been a dreamer, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have worked. I would have missed what was happening, I would have made mistakes, I would have failed. So even if we don't talk about higher consciousness, even if we just talk about the material world, being present to reality, being a meditator is a huge advantage. Being switched on is a huge advantage. Living in your head is switched off. You're switched off because you're not with what's real. You're with what you're actually thinking, which is dream. So, it's up to you. No one can make you. No one can force you. You've got to be interested in it. A lot of people get interested in insights. They think that somehow insights are going to raise their consciousness levels. So they take drugs, or they do Vipassana courses for 12 days so they can have insights. Insights don't change anything. Insights are actually an invitation to do the work. They're not the answer. A lot of people think the insights you get raise your consciousness levels. They don't. They don't raise your consciousness. What raises your consciousness levels is removing all the obstacles that are in the way of having higher consciousness. Mostly your belief systems, mostly your service of fear rather than your stepping through of fear. As your consciousness levels rise, you become interested in removing everything that is in the way of higher consciousness, because you're not interested in staying in lower consciousness anymore. You can see what it does to everyone around you. It doesn't serve them very well. Running true to your default patterns handed to you by your parents, your society, your church and your government isn't such a great idea, because a lot of those belief systems are limiting. They keep you very small. They keep you squashed. They keep you in lower consciousness. as you raise your consciousness levels, you're not interested in anything that limits you. You like to fly and you like to keep flying. But that's up to you too. You're the only one that can make a difference in your life. Nobody else can do it for you. Not possible. And so, people spend a lot of money trying to get higher consciousness, but money doesn't buy you higher consciousness. Practice does. The practice of something that will take you there. And thinking isn't the answer. Collecting knowledge from books is not the answer. Collecting knowledge from gurus is not the answer. Knowledge does not raise your consciousness levels. The professors at the universities do not have higher consciousness, but they have knowledge. They are knowledgeable. Their consciousness level isn't that high. Only practice will raise your consciousness levels. The practice of removing any obstacle that is in the way, any belief system that limits you, anything that keeps you small, basically, anything that contracts you. And that's going to be quite a task if you're interested. I ask people quite regularly, how conscious do you want to be? Because it means you need to be present every moment to reality. Here, 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 always here, not here.